So the nucleic acids are heteropolymer of nucleotides. See, the nucleotides, they are not of the same type. They might be adenylate acid, they might be thymidylate acid, or they might be the guanylyl acid or cytidylate acid. So that is the reason the nucleic acids, that is DNA and RNA, they are considered to be heteropolymer since they are not of the same type of nucleotides. We call it as heteropolymer of nucleotide. That is, many nucleotides are linked to form the polynucleotide. So they are heteropolymer of nucleotides where many nucleotides are linked to form the polynucleotide. So you can notice here the polynucleotide. So generally they'll be having this nucleotide will be having a phosphate group, sugar and nitrogen base. So the polynucleotide, and they are heteropolymer since they have many types of nitrogenous bases attached to them. Since the nucleotides are of different types, like it can be adenylate acid, guanylyl acid, or thymidylate acid, or cytidylate acid. So we call it as heteropolymer of nucleotides. So this polynucleotide is a heteropolymer of nucleotides. Nucleic acids, they are of two types. DNA, that is, we call it as deoxyribonucleic acid, and RNA, which we call it as ribonucleic acid. So nucleic acids are of two types: DNA, which is called as deoxyribonucleic acid; RNA is called as ribonucleic acid or ribose nucleic acid. Now, the secondary structure of DNA, Watson and Crick, they have put forth this double helical model of DNA. See, DNA has two functions that they might not have described now. So one is autocatalytic function, that is synthesis of DNA itself. We call it as autocatalytic function. Then there is the heterocatalytic function wherein they synthesize mRNA. So we call that process as transcription, isn't it? So the heterocatalytic function is also exhibited by DNA, where DNA synthesizes mRNA. So those two functions you just remember about DNA, autocatalytic and heterocatalytic function of DNA. Now the secondary structure of DNA, so the double helical model of DNA or duplex model of DNA was put forth by Watson and Crick. So as per this model, so the DNA molecule is double stranded and they are arranged in an helical manner. Okay, so there are more than a dozen forms of DNA, such as A DNA, B DNA, C DNA, D DNA, E DNA, Z DNA. So this sort of dozen types of DNA are there. DNA consists of two polynucleotide strands. So this is an open chain. To make us understand it in a simple way, this is an open parental strand, and this is the double helical model as put forth by Watson and Crick. So this double helical model itself, it has been shown as an open chain. So they have two polynucleotide strands. DNA has two polynucleotide strands. One is from 5 prime to 3 prime. Another is from 3 prime to 5 prime. So, and they are arranged anti-parallelly as a double helical structure. So they are arranged anti-parallelly as a double helical structure. So that
Excuse
is
me,
what,
sir.
yes.
This double strand structure is made up of sugar and phosphate, no, sir? The strand of DNA.
See, they have the strand also has the rungs in the form of nitrogenous base, which are base paired. Complementary base pairing is there. Okay, they are made up of this. The rungs, the strands of it is made up of sugar and phosphate. Okay, so the polynucleotide strands, they are arranged anti-parallelly as a double helical structure. Okay, so the sugar phosphate backbone, they also call it as. Okay, and the rungs of the ladder, they are made up of this nitrogenous bases, which are complementary base pairing of nitrogenous bases are seen between this anti-parallel strands. Fine.
Ah, yes, sir.
So DNA consists of two polynucleotide strands which are arranged anti-parallelly as a double helix. One strand is from 5 prime to 3 prime. Another strand is from 3 prime to 5 prime. Okay, the open chain you can notice here, the strand will be having the sugar phosphate backbone. Then they have these rungs of ladder like what it looks like. So these are made up of nitrogenous base pairs. And from these two parallel strands, they'll be having complementary base pairing. See, the complementary base pairing is adenine always base pairs with thymine and vice versa. That is, thymine always base pairs with adenine. Similarly, guanine always base pairs with cytosine, and cytosine always base pairs with guanine. See, in DNA, adenine base pairs with thymine, but in RNA, it would be adenine would be base pairing with uracil. So you should remember about that. RNA don't have thymine, instead they have uracil. But in DNA, adenine also always base pairs with thymine, and the bond between this adenine and thymine is going to be double hydrogen bond, and the bond between the guanine and cytosine or vice versa, it's always going to be triple hydrogen bonds. So adenine and thymine, it is going to be double hydrogen bonds. The bond between guanine and cytosine will be triple hydrogen bonds. So, or and vice versa. That you have to remember about in case of a double helical structure. So in DNA, a nucleotide consists of, so we have already discussed what is a nucleotide made up of. Okay, they have a nitrogen base, deoxyribose sugar, and a phosphate group. So you can notice here, the sugar phosphate group will be found on this backbone. That is, the strands will have the sugar phosphate group, and the rungs of the ladder are made up of these nitrogenous base pairs, so which are base pairing. So one nucleotide, here you can see this red part of it, then that is the guanine, and here you can see the ribose sugar, and this sky blue color is the phosphate group. So this one part of it, nitrogen base sugar plus phosphate plus the nitrogen base sugar plus phosphate group, together we call it as nucleotide. So these nucleotides are of one strand, it is base pairing with the nucleotide of another strand. Okay, there is another nucleotide strand. So they are complementary base pairing is there. If guanine is there, this would be cytosine. So there is a triple bond formed between them. Okay, so just remember about it. In DNA, a nucleotide consists of nitrogen base, deoxyribose sugar, and phosphate group. Apart from that, you should also understand the diameter of this DNA is 2 nanometer. The diameter of this DNA is 2 nanometer. So if you convert it into angstrom, you know that 1 angstrom equals 10 to the power of minus 10 meter. 1 nanometer equals 10 to the power of minus 9 meter. So if you convert this diameter in angstrom, it is nothing but 20 angstrom. But if you are discussing it in terms of nanometer, it is 2 nanometer. And you also notice that the internucleotide distance, that is in between the two rungs of the ladder, the distance. So the internucleotide distance is always going to be 0.34 nanometer, or in terms of angstrom, it is 3.4 angstrom. And for every 10 base pairs, there is a repeat of base sequences. So every 10 base pairs, it completes one uh, so completes one twist or one complete uh, so this one is formed, helix is formed. So for every 10 base pairs, so what is that? Every 10 base pairs, 10 into 3.34 nanometer, that is equivalent to 3.4 nanometer. So for every 3.4 nanometer, there is a repeat of base sequences. Okay, or in terms of angstrom, you can say it as for every 34 angstrom, there is a repeat of base sequences. So these are other points that you should also be aware about. So in DNA, a nucleotide consists of nitrogen base, sugar, and phosphate group. So the backbone strands of DNA is formed by, so this is the backbone strands. They are formed by the sugar phosphate sugar chain. So SPS, you can notice that sugar phosphate sugar chain. So the backbone of DNA is formed by the sugar phosphate sugar chain. The steps or rungs of the ladder, they are formed of nitrogen base pairs. So nitrogen bases includes adenine, guanine, thymine, and cytosine. So DNA does not have uracil. Uracil is absent in DNA and they are present only in case of RNA. Thymine would be absent in RNA. So we have already discussed about that. So the steps are formed or the rungs of this ladder are formed by the nitrogen base pairs. Nitrogen base pairs, there is a complementary base pairing that is taking place here. Nitrogen bases include adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine. So adenine is represented by A, guanine is represented by G, thymine is represented by T, and cytosine is represented by C. So adenine base pairs with thymine. So by two hydrogen bonds, adenine base pairs with thymine. So the complementary base pairing of adenine is thymine. Adenine base pairs with thymine. So and it is going to be two hydrogen bonds. So adenine base pairs with thymine by two hydrogen bonds or vice versa. That is thymine base pairs with adenine by two hydrogen bonds. So you can notice that this double bond is there, two hydrogen bonds. They are made up of adenine base pairs with thymine by two hydrogen bonds. Cytosine base pairs with guanine by three hydrogen bonds or vice versa. That is guanine base pairs with cytosine by three hydrogen bonds. So this is the base pairing, complementary base pairing. Adenine always base pairs with thymine by two hydrogen bonds, and guanine always base pairs with cytosine by three hydrogen bonds. So a phosphate molecule, it is going to link the 3' carbon of the sugar of one nucleotide. So this is the 3' carbon of the sugar of one nucleotide, a phosphate molecule. So they link the 3' carbon of one nuclei of 3' carbon of one sugar to the 5' carbon of the next sugar of the next nucleotide. So the phosphate group always links the 3', this region is the 3' carbon of sugar of one nucleotide to the 5' carbon of the sugar of the next nucleotide. That is how the phosphate molecule is interlinking the sugars. So the phosphate molecule links the 3' carbon of sugar, 3' carbon of the sugar of one nucleotide with the 5' carbon of the sugar of another nucleotide. That is how they are linking them, the phosphate molecule. That also you have to remember about. See the bond between the phosphate and OH group of sugar, it is going to be an ester bond. The bond between the phosphate and OH group of the sugar is going to be an ester bond, as there is one such ester bond on either side. So there is one ester bond on either side. So we call it as phosphodiester bond. See the phosphate, the bond between phosphate and the sugar, OH group of sugar is formed is an ester bond. Since there are ester bond on either side of the uh, nucleotide, so it on either side of the strand, it is called as phosphodiester bond. Since there is ester bond on either side, so it is also called as phosphodiester bond. The bond between sugar and nitrogenous base. The bond between sugar and nitrogen base is called N-glycosidic bond. So there was an ester bond, N-glycosidic bond, and hydrogen bonds. So you can notice this three types of bonds. So the bond between phosphate and OH group of sugar is an ester bond. Since there are two on either side of it. So we call it as phosphodiester bond. The bond between sugar and the nitrogenous base is formed by N-glycosidic bond. And the bond between the nitrogenous bases are by hydrogen bonds. So the adenine and thymine, they base pair with two hydrogen bonds, and guanine and cytosine, they base pair with three hydrogen bonds. So you find this phosphodiester bond, N glycosidic bond, hydrogen bonds. So the bond between sugar and nitrogen is called N glycosidic bond. So remember about that. If you take a bDNA, the duplex model of bDNA, one full turn has 10 steps. So the one full helical turn of this bDNA has 10 steps. One full turn of uh, bDNA has 10 steps, that is 10 base pairs. So length of one full turn equals 34 angstrom, or you can also call it as 3.4 nanometer with internucleotide distance of 3.4 angstrom, or it is 0.34 nanometer. So, so length of one complete turn equals 34 angstrom, or you can call it as 3.4 nanometer. So with internucleotide distance of 0.34 nanometer or 3.4 angstrom. So at each step, the strand turns. So at each step, the strand is turning 36 degree. So 36 into 10 is 360 degree for a full turn. So in bDNA, one full turn has 10 steps, 10 base pairs are there. The length of one full turn is 34 angstrom. That is 3.4 angstrom is the internucleotide distance for each step. Or you can also say it as length of one full turn. In nanometer, it is 3.4 angstrom with the internucleotide distance being 0.34 nanometer. At each step, the strand turns 36 degree. So for one full turn, that is 360 degrees. So they have to take 10 steps. So that is about the secondary structure of DNA, or the double helical model of DNA as put forth by Watson and Crick. The next thing that we'll be discussing about metabolism, so we have already discussed, and I've told you the backdrop is the large number of chemical reactions which are all interlinked within the living organisms. The byproducts of one is going to be linked with the other. So you find this large number of chemical reactions, they are not occurring in isolation, but they are interlinked. The product of one might be the reactant of other, so it goes on. Okay, so let us study and discuss about metabolism. So all the biochemical reactions taking place inside a living system, they constitute metabolism. The sum total of chemical reactions taking place within an organism, we call it as metabolism. We have already discussed about definition of metabolism. So all the biochemical reactions taking place inside a living system, they together constitute metabolism. So example, what are all the biochemical reactions taking place within a living system? So examples are removal of carbon dioxide from amino acids to form amines, removal of amino group in a nucleotide base, hydrolysis of a glycosidic bond. These are a few of the biochemical reactions. Removal of carbon dioxide from amino acid to form amines, removal of amino group in a nucleotide base, hydrolysis of a glycosidic bond. These are a few examples of metabolism. So metabolism, you know, it is of two types: anabolism, or the building up process. So from simple molecules, they are going to form complex organic molecules. That is anabolism or building up process. The example is photosynthesis, where carbon dioxide and water, they are going to combine to form glucose, a complex organic molecule. And there is going to be involvement of energy. There is expenditure of energy during anabolism. Catabolism is a breakdown process. Catabolism, a complex organic molecule, breaks down to form simple molecules, and in the process, energy is released. Okay, so that is catabolism or breakdown process. Example is respiration. So these we are already aware about. So a few biochemical reaction examples for the metabolism are the removal of carbon dioxide from amino acid to form amines, the removal of amino group in a nucleotide base, then hydrolysis of a glycosidic bonds. These are a few biochemical reactions of the many metabolic reactions taking place within the body. Okay, the intermediate products of metabolic reactions, we call it as metabolites. Later we'll be discussing about the primary metabolites and secondary metabolites. So the intermediate products of metabolic reactions, we call it as metabolites. So here you have this complete glycolysis followed by the TCA cycle. After the formation of pyruvic acid, they enter into this C3 cycle. So the metabolites, the intermediate products of metabolism, we call it as metabolites. The flow of metabolites in the metabolic pathway, they have a definite rate and direction, just like traffic, automobile traffic in a on a road. So the flow of metabolites in a metabolic pathway has definite rate and direction. The flow of metabolites in a metabolic pathway has a definite rate, the speed of it, as well as the direction in which it has to proceed, similar to a automobile traffic. So this metabolite flow is called as dynamic state of body constituents. So the flow of metabolites in metabolic pathway has a definite rate and direction. So what you can notice is, so the flow of metabolites in a metabolic pathway has a definite rate and direction, like and similar to an automobile traffic. So this metabolic flow, we call it as dynamic state of body constituents. The metabolic flow, we define it as dynamic state of body constituents. So remember about this aspect of it. It is a dynamic state of body constituents. So the metabolites, so the products of a metabolic pathway are metabolites. The metabolites are of two types. Primary metabolites, they have identifiable functions in physiological processes and they are necessary for uh, life. Example, amino acids, the sugars, nucleic acid, lipids, vitamins, they are all primary metabolites. So the primary metabolites, they have identifiable function in physiological processes and they are necessary for life to exist. Okay, so those metabolites, we call them as primary metabolites. So metabolites have having identifiable functions in the physiological process and a necessity for life to exist. We call these as primary metabolites. Example is amino acids, sugar, lipids, nucleic acids, vitamins. They are all example for primary metabolites. Secondary metabolites, they are not directly involved in the normal growth, development, or reproduction of an organism. So they are not directly involved. Secondary metabolites, they are not directly involved in the normal growth, development, or reproduction of a living organism. So the secondary metabolites are generally found in plants, fungi, and microbial cells. The secondary metabolites are generally found in plants, fungi, and microbial cells. Examples for secondary metabolites are alkaloids, terpenes, terpenoids, pigments, essential oil, toxins, lecithins, lectins, and drugs. So they are all a few examples of secondary metabolites. So secondary metabolites, they are not directly involved in the life processes, in normal life processes such as growth, development, and reproduction. They are not directly involved. So they are found in plants, fungi, and microbial cells. Examples of the secondary metabolites are alkaloids, terpenoids, pigments, essential oil, toxins. Then there is lectin, drugs. So these are all the examples for secondary metabolites. So now the secondary metabolites, certain examples are there. For the pigments, You have the example of secondary metabolites, like the examples of the secondary metabolite pigments are carotenoids and anthocyanins. I've already told you carotenoids are precursor for vitamin E, and they are also responsible for the orangish nature of various vegetables like carrot. Carrot is rich in carotenoids. Papaya also has carotenoids. So you can just remember, so the pigments, the secondary metabolite pigments like carotenoids, examples are carotenoids, anthocyanins. Anthocyanins is responsible for the color of the flower, fruits. So they are all because of this anthocyanin pigments. The color of the flower, fruits are all because of this anthocyanin pigment. So the pigments, the secondary metabolite pigments examples are carotenoids and anthocyanins. Alkaloids, the example for secondary metabolite, alkaloids, secondary metabolite like alkaloids, the examples are the morphine and codeine. They are obtained from opium. I told you this opium plant, the scientific name is Papaver somnifera. Guscus plant it is, Guscus. Okay, so the uh, we also call it as poppy seeds, isn't it? So the Papaver somnifera, the scientific name of this plant. So the how they are going to extract this alkaloids, which we call it as opiates. Opiates include opium, heroin, and morphine. So how are they going to extract this morphine and codeine? They are obtained from this poppy plant, wherein they make a cut in the unripe fruits. They make a cut using a blade, they make a cut, and the extractions from these cuts, they collect them and utilize it for the extraction of morphine and codeine. So the alkaloids, morphine and codeine, which is extracted from poppy plant, is a secondary metabolite. So I've even told you that to grow a poppy plant, you should be having license and permission from the government. You just can't grow a poppy plant and say that I'm growing for its ornamental flowers or for the poppy seeds. So you should be having the license and permission from the government to grow this poppy plants. Okay. So if you are growing it without any license or permission, you are subject to punishment as per the Narcotic Act. Okay. Narcotic and Drugs Act. Uh, you'll be punishable. So you should be very careful when you're growing this poppy plants. So they have very colorful flowers. So the alkaloids, secondary metabolite like alkaloids are extracted from poppy plants like the morphine and codeine. They are obtained from this poppy plant or Papaver somnifera. So opiates, we call it as the extract, we call it as opiates, which include the opium, heroin, and morphine. So even codeine are extracted from this uh, Papaver somnifera or poppy plant. Just remember about this alkaloids. The next examples for terpenoids are the monoterpenes, diterpenes. So you have various terpenes that are obtained from different products of it. Like some of them contain terpenoids, like eucalyptus oil, Nilgiri Thailam, or that is which is used in the Amrutanjan or Jendu Balm or even in the Vicks. So, which is an important ingredient, the Nilgiri oil or eucalyptus oil. So, very aromatic. So, they contain terpenoids. Cinnamon oil. So, they are used for flavoring. Cinnamon is used for flavoring food, isn't it? This is cheke. So even this is containing terpenoids. Cloves, they also contain terpenoids. So they are all used as spices. The cinnamon, bark of plants. So the clove, which is considered to be the queen of spices. Okay, king of spices is cardamom, that is Elaki. Queen of spices is clove, lavanga. So this is the queen of spices. So cloves also have terpenoids. Even you can extract the clove oil. So clove, whenever you have a toothache, you can surely use this cloves. They give temporary relief. Okay. So the cloves or clove oil is extracted from them. They are used for flavoring the food. Okay. So ginger is for aroma part of it. Then yellow flowers. so which have scent, the scented yellow flowers. So they also contain this terpenoid. So these are all the examples for various examples which contain terpenoids. Terpenoids are secondary uh, metabolites. So the examples are monoterpenes and diterpenes, which you can find in these examples like eucalyptus oil, the cinnamon and cloves, which are used for flavoring, ginger, which is used for aroma, and yellow flowers for scent. So the essential oils, they are extracted from the lemongrass or citronella, we call it as. So this essential oil is also a secondary metabolite. This is used for as an lemongrass oil is extracted from the citronella plant uh, or lemongrass, what we call it as. So this is an essential oil is also an example for the secondary metabolites. Then toxins like abrin is obtained from rosary pea, Abrus precatorius. Okay, abrin is a chemical substance which is obtained from rosary pea or Abrus precatorius. So you should remember that this is very toxic substance. So toxins like abrin and resin, highly toxic substances. So they are examples for secondary metabolites. So secondary metabolites, toxins, examples are abrin and resin. So resin is used as a biological warfare. Also, they use this resin. Resin is extracted from this castor seeds. So you know that in my very minute quantity they are present, especially anyone who has consumed castor oil, the after effects you would be knowing about. So Ireland ekudadangide mukha, that is what we say, isn't it? Because you can have that reaction only when you have a castor oil. That is what is the saying in Kannada. Anyway, so this resin is obtained from this Ricinus communis, that is castor plant, and that is very highly toxic. So the isolated compound resin from this Ricinus communis is highly toxic, and they are also used as for biological warfare. Resin is also used. Okay, the organism which is used is anthrax, Bacillus anthrax is used, and toxins like resin are used for in biological warfare. So the abrin and resin are example for toxins. Secondary metabolite toxins examples are abrin and resin. Abrin is obtained from rosary pea. You can see this dark colored seeds within this rosary pea, and the castor seeds. The white part of this castor seed, we call it as caruncle. Okay, so you can notice here resin is obtained from Ricinus communis or castor. Okay, the castor plant of it. Then there is also the concanvalin A, which is a lectin. It is obtained from this Cannavelia ensiformis, or we also call it as jack bean. So the jack bean Cannavelia ensiformis, from which we are obtaining this uh, lectin, secondary metabolite lectin. That example is concanvalin A is a secondary metabolite lectin example, which is obtained from this jack bean plant or Cannavelia ensiformis. Okay, then we are obtaining the uh, drugs like vinblastine and vincristin are obtained from this Canigale plant or periwinkle plant. This is Vinca rosea. So where they have this rotate corolla. Okay, this Vinca rosea or periwinkle plant, you notice this vinblastine and vincristin are the drugs which are obtained from Vinca rosea. These vincristin and vinblastine are example for secondary metabolite drugs. Okay, they are used in treatment of cancer. So from the turmeric, we are obtaining this curcumin. So curcumin is obtained from turmeric, and so this is also an secondary metabolite drug example is curcumin, vinblastine, and vincristin. Okay, so turmeric is nowadays it's a craze in many of the American and European countries where they have this golden yellow milk. So early in the morning they have this golden milk, so and it is considered to be highly productive. So you know that anti-inflammatory properties, antibiotic properties are there in case of this turmeric. So our ancestors have been using this turmeric as a medicinal plant as well as in food. So we are using this turmeric from long. So curcumin, which is obtained from turmeric, is uh, also an example of secondary metabolite drugs. Okay, then polymeric substances, secondary metabolite, polymeric substances like of secondary metabolites. Examples are rubber, which is obtained from the rubber plant Hevia brasiliensis. So where we make a cut and collect this latex from this plant in a uh, cup. So this rubber, gums, they are all examples. Cellulose, they are all examples of polymeric substances. Secondary metabolite of polymeric substances, the examples are rubber, gums, cellulose. So remember about this various secondary metabolites and their examples of this different types of secondary metabolites. Then metabolic pathways. If you look into this metabolic pathways, these are the series of linked multi-step chemical reaction in metabolism. See, the glycolysis you might be studying separately in respiration, but glycolysis products, the previous products, they are obtained from the hydrolysis of food substrate. We get glucose, and this glucose undergoes glycolysis to produce two molecules of pyruvic acid. Now, this two molecules of pyruvic acid is required for Krebs cycle. So only if pyruvic acid is synthesized, they can go for this Krebs cycle. So you should understand this is just an example in respiration I'm talking about. So metabolic pathways are the series of linked multi-step chemical reactions in metabolism. So metabolic pathways are series of linked multi-step chemical reactions in metabolism. Only if in the liver the nitrogenous waste undergo this ornithine cycle, we are going to get urea. After the formation of urea, so the blood will be purified in the kidney wherein they remove this urea. So we are ureotelic animals. But for the formation of urea, they should undergo this ornithine cycle in liver. So the byproduct of this ornithine cycle, urea, it enters into this process of purification or removal from our body. So that is why we call this metabolic pathways as a series of linked multi-step chemical reactions in metabolism. We call it as metabolic pathway. So the types of metabolic pathways, two types of metabolic pathways are there: anabolic or biosynthetic pathways and catabolic pathways. So in anabolic pathways, anabolism, so simpler molecules forms complex structures. It's a constructive process. Anabolic pathways, simple molecules are going to form complex structures and it is a constructive process. So whereas in catabolic pathway, complex molecules become simple structures and it's a destructive process. Anabolic pathways, simple molecules are going to form complex organic molecules, so it's a constructive process. So in catabolic pathway, complex molecules are going to become simple structures, so it is a destructive pathway. So anabolic pathway, they consume energy like photosynthesis, they take energy from the sunlight. And in catabolism pathway, where there's a complex molecule is forming the simple molecules, there is release of energy. So it releases energy. The example for anabolic pathways are building up process, or constructive pathways are acetic acid to cholesterol, formation of cholesterol from acetic acid, formation of proteins from amino acids, photosynthesis. These are all constructive pathways or anabolic pathways. So the catabolic pathways or destructive pathways, the breakdown are glucose to lactic acid. Glycolysis process is a catabolic pathway or destructive pathway. Respiration is an example for this destructive pathway or catabolic pathway. So these are the types of metabolic pathways and examples for this metabolic pathways. So metabolic pathways are of two types: anabolic or biosynthetic pathway and catabolic or the destructive pathway. So the energy which is released through catabolism, that is the destructive pathway, where the complex molecules uh, are going to form simple molecules. So by the liberation of energy, the energy released through catabolism, it is stored in the form of chemical bonds. When needed, this bond energy is utilized for biosynthetic, osmotic, and mechanical works. See, adenosine triphosphate, ATP. So they have bond energy, the most important energy currency. So energy currency of living organisms are ATP. Even in human beings, the energy currency is ATP. Even in a paramecium, it is ATP. Even in a plant, it is an ATP. Even in a dog, the energy currency is ATP. So the universal energy currency in all the living organisms are ATP, adenosine triphosphate. So the most important energy currency in the living system is the bond energy. That bond energy is present within this ATP, adenosine triphosphate. So whenever this adenosine triphosphate, so they are going to break down to form adenosine diphosphate with a release of inorganic phosphate, large amount of bond energy is released. So the breakdown of ATP molecules, so they release this high energy bonds are found in this ATP. Okay, so when the ATP molecules breaks down to form ADP, so the bond energy is released. Okay, the most important energy currency in living system is the bond energy in adenosine triphosphate. So whenever they break down, they release energy. So the energy released through the catabolism is stored in form of chemical bonds. When needed, this chemical bond energy is utilized for biosynthetic, osmotic, and mechanical works of an organism. The living states in organisms, the metabolites are present in different concentrations. So you already know metabolites are the products of metabolic process. So the metabolites might be primary and secondary metabolites. In living organisms, the metabolites are present in different concentration. Example, blood concentration, the glucose uh, in blood in normal person, the glucose concentration in blood of a normal person is 4.2 to 6.1 micromoles per liter. The concentration of hormones is nanograms per ml. So the metabolites are present in different metabolites are present in different concentrations in different organisms. So that is one power point that you have to remember regarding the living state. In organisms, the metabolites are present in different concentrations. Example, blood concentration of glucose in a normal person is 4.2 to 6.1 micromolecules per liter, whereas the concentration of hormone is nanogram per ml. And you should also remember the living systems at equilibrium, they cannot perform work. As living organisms work continuously, they cannot reach equilibrium. They try to reach equilibrium, but they cannot reach equilibrium. So the living organisms, as living organisms work continuously, they cannot reach equilibrium. So the living state is a non-equilibrium steady state to be able to perform work. So you can define the living state as non-equilibrium steady state to be able to perform work. The living state is described as a non-equilibrium steady state to be able to perform work. So living process is a constant effort to prevent falling into equilibrium. Okay. So if there is equilibrium, there is no work done. So the living process is a constant effort to prevent falling into equilibrium. This is achieved by energy input obtained from metabolism. How is this equilibrium not maintained? How is this non-equilibrium maintained? It is achieved by energy input obtained from metabolism. So no living state can exist without metabolism. So the living state is a non-equilibrium steady state, which is to be able to perform work. So the non-equilibrium is achieved by energy obtained through metabolism. So no living system or no living state cannot exist without metabolism. So the next important concept that we had studied was enzymes. So we had defined various parameters, definition of enzyme. So enzymes are biological catalysts, or you can also call them as biocatalysts, which influences the speed of biochemical reactions. So in some of them, when the enzymes are present, the speed of it doubles up, or the speed of this chemical reaction is going to drastically increase. So we are going to later quote one example of that, especially the carbonic anhydrase, the formation of carbonic acid. Without an enzyme, it would be 600 molecules in 1 hour. So that is the formation of carbonic acid without an enzyme. With an enzyme, they are going to form 6 lakh molecules within 1 second. So that is the rate of reaction that can be increased. So enzymes are biocatalysts which influence the speed or rate of biochemical reactions. So that is the impact that an enzyme has in increasing the speed or rate of biochemical reaction. All enzymes are proteins, but all proteins are not enzymes. You should remember that. So all minerals are ore, but all ores are minerals, but all minerals are not ores. So you have that in your uh, metallurgy topic. You might be studying about that. So all enzymes are proteins, but all proteins are not enzymes. That statement you should also remember about. Definition of enzymes are biocatalysts which influence the speed of biochemical reaction without itself getting involved in the reaction or undergoing any change. So enzymes are biocatalysts which influence the speed of biochemical reaction without itself uh, getting involved in the reaction or undergoing any change. So we call these as enzymes. So enzymes are specific. That is, each enzyme has its own substrate. So enzyme specificity is there. Enzymes are specific, and each enzyme has its own substrate. So RNA, nucleic acids like RNA that behave as enzymes, we call it as ribozymes. Nucleic acids like RNA that behave like enzymes, we call them as ribozymes. So enzymes form tertiary structure. So they form 3D with some crevices or pockets called active site. So they are three-dimensional structure. Enzymes form tertiary structure or three-dimensional structure with some crevices. These crevices or pockets in the enzymes, we call it as active site, into which the substrate fits. So they have some crevices or pockets, which we call it as active sites. So enzymes have this uh, crevices or pockets called as active site into which the substrate fits. Okay. Chemical compounds, they undergo two types of changes, like physical changes. Water is an example of that. A change in shape or state of matter without breaking bonds. A change in state or shape of matter without breaking bonds. Example, ice melts to form water, water becomes water vapor. So there is a change in state from solid to liquid, liquid to gaseous state without breaking bonds, or a change in their chemical composition without breaking bonds. So example, ice melts into water, water becomes a water vapor. So there is a change in shape or state of the matter without breaking bonds. So that is physical change. Chemical changes in this, bonds are broken and new bonds are formed. It may be organic or inorganic reaction. In chemical change or chemical reactions, the bonds are broken and new bonds are formed. It may be in case of organic or inorganic reactions. Example, inorganic reaction, barium hydroxide plus sulfuric acid. There is a bond broken between barium hydroxide as well as sulfuric acid, and they are going to, there is a new bond formed between barium and sulfate. So barium sulfate and water is formed. So in this chemical reaction, the bonds are broken and new bonds are formed. Like there is a formation of product like by a barium sulfate by a new bond, and water by it's a new bond here. So the organic reactions, organic chemical reactions are like starch plus water. They are going to form glucose. Okay. So the rate of physical or chemical process. So chemical compounds undergo two types of changes. Physical change, that is change in shape or state of these matter without breaking bonds. Chemical change, where the bonds are broken and new bonds are formed. So chemical compounds undergo two types of changes: physical change, chemical change, or chemical reaction. So rate of physical or chemical process is equal to, so they have defined it as amount of product formed per unit time. So rate of physical or chemical change is nothing but amount of product formed per unit time. That is delta P by delta T. Okay. So that is what is the rate of physical change, physical or chemical process. Chemical reactions, the rate is called as velocity if the direction is specified. See, you might have studied about scalar quantities, vector quantities. Scalar quantities have magnitude. Speed is an example for scalar quantity. They have magnitude but no direction. Velocity is an example for vector quantity because they have both magnitude and direction. So velocity, when can you call rate as velocity? If the direction is specified apart from magnitude. So the rates of physical and chemical processes, they are influenced by various factors such as temperature, pH, and other things. So they are influenced by factors such as temperature. Generally, the rate of reaction doubles or decreases by half for every 10 degree centigrade change in either direction. If there is an increase in positive increases there, the rate of reaction doubles up. If there is a decrease of 10 degree, so the rate of reaction decreases by half. Okay, so such as temperature, generally the rate doubles or decreases by half for every 10 degree centigrade change in either direction. It can be positive or negative. Okay, so that is, it can either increase in temperature, the rate of reaction doubles up. If there is decrease of 10 degrees centigrade in temperature, the rate of reaction is going to reduce by half. So the rate of enzyme catalyzed reaction is very high. So the enzyme catalyzed reactions are very high. Example, carbonic anhydrase is the fastest enzyme. It accelerates the following reaction 10 million times. See, carbon dioxide plus water in presence of this enzyme, carbonic anhydrase, they are going to form carbonic acid. In the absence of this carbonic anhydrase, only 200 molecules of carbonic acid are formed in an hour. It is not 600, it is 200 molecules of carbonic acid are formed in an hour. In presence of carbonic anhydrase enzyme, so 6 lakh carbonic acid molecules are formed per second. So that is the rate of the enzyme catalyzed reaction, which is very high. This can be demonstrated by this activity of this carbonic anhydrase enzyme, which is the fastest enzyme. And this enzyme accelerates the following the formation of carbonic acid reaction by 10 million times. So that is what is the uh, effect of the enzyme catalyzed reactions. Then in chemical reactions in a metabolic pathway, each step is catalyzed by different enzymes. In glycolysis, 10 different enzymes take part. So which I've already discussed about, like glucose forming a phosphate. Forming a phosphate or losing a phosphate is generally kinase enzyme. So change of structure without change in molecular formula, but general change in chemical structure is brought about by isomerase enzyme. So aldolase is also, it is breaking down 6 carbon fructose into 2,3 carbon fructose. So DHAP, dihydroxyacetone phosphate, phosphoglyceraldehyde. So now this in an isomerase, dihydroxin is converted into glyceraldehyde. So you find this kinase mutase, the change in the position of phosphate from third carbon atom to second carbon atom. It is brought about by an enzyme mutase. Then enolase enzyme, they are going to form this phosphoenol pyruvate. So kinase enzyme again, where there is a loss of ATA with the phosphate, and there is a formation of pyruvic acid from a single glucose molecule, C6H12O6. Two pyruvic acid molecules are formed at the end of this glycolysis, C3H4O3. So two molecules are formed. So this is what is the glycolysis, which will be again studying in plant physiology topic respiration. Okay, so 10 different enzymes take part. So in a metabolic pathway, each step is catalyzed by different enzymes. Okay, so you found this enolase, you found this aldolase, you found this kinase, isomerase, okay, mutase enzymes. So different types of enzymes you have noticed here. So in glycolysis, 10 different enzymes take part for the formation of two pyruvic acid molecules. The nature of the enzyme action, okay, so or the mechanism of enzyme action, or they can also call it as catalytic cycle. So enzyme acts with a substrate like a lock and key. So you can open a specific lock with a particular key, not any key, isn't it? So the enzyme acts like a lock and key model. So the enzyme might be the lock and the substrate might be the keys. So it includes the following steps. So the lock and key model includes the following step. Substrate, they are going to bind to the active site. Active site is the crevice which is present within this crevice or pit, which is present within this enzyme for the substrate to bind. So substrate binds to the active site of the enzyme and they form this E plus S. This induces some change. So this induces some change in enzyme so that the substrate is tightly bound with active site of enzyme. They are tightly bound with the active site of enzyme to form an enzyme substrate complex. They form an enzyme substrate complex. The active site breaks the chemical bonds of substrates. So the substrate which has this chemical bond is broken to form enzyme product complex. The active site breaks the chemical bond of the substrate to form enzyme product complex, which we call it as the EP. So in this diagram itself, everything is described. The active site of the enzyme breaks the uh, chemical bond of substrate to form enzyme product complex. The enzyme releases the products and the free enzyme is ready to bind to other molecules of the substrate. We call this process as E plus P. So enzyme releases the products and the free enzyme is ready to bind to other molecules of the substrate. So this step is the E plus P step. So this pathway goes through some unstable transition state structures. So there is unstable transition state structures. You can notice this in this pathway. So there is enzyme E plus S, the substrate uh, binds to the active site of enzyme. They form a complex enzyme substrate complex. The active site of the enzyme, they break down the bonds of the substrate and they form this enzyme product complex. So the enzyme releases the products and the free enzyme is ready to bind to other molecules of the substrate. And this state is the E plus P state. So how are the enzymes speeding up a chemical reaction? So the concept of activation energy. So this concept arose when this question uh, was asked, how do enzymes speed up a chemical reaction? This led to the development of concept of activation energy. So what is activation energy? So activation energy is the additional energy required to start a chemical reaction. In an exothermic reaction, exothermic or endothermic reaction, exothermic they liberate energy, endothermic they take energy. The substrate must go through a higher energy state. It is called as transition state energy. So in an exothermic or endothermic reaction, the substrate must uh, go through a much higher energy state that is called as uh, transition state energy. So therefore, the activation energy is the difference. The activation energy is the difference between average energy of substrate and transition state energy. So average energy of substrate and transition state of energy. In an exothermic or endothermic reaction, the substrate must go through a much higher energy state, which we call it as transition state energy. So therefore, activation energy can also be defined as it is defined as additional energy required to start a chemical reaction. Activation energy can also be defined as difference between the average energy of substrate and transition state energy. We can call it as activation energy. So this concept of activation energy now we understand about. So activation energy without enzyme is with enzyme is lesser, and activation energy without enzyme is higher. So that is the progress of reaction. So activation energy is the difference between the average energy of substrate. So with enzyme and without enzyme, fine. So the average difference between the average energy of substrate and the transition state energy. If the product P is a lower energy level than the substrate, yes. So what do you understand from that? If the product P is at a lower energy level than the substrate, the reaction is an exothermic reaction or a spontaneous reaction where energy is lost. It requires no energy by heating to form the product. In a biochemical reaction, the enzymes have lower the activation energy. In a biochemical reaction, the enzymes they lower the activation energy. See, activation energy with enzyme is very low. Activation energy without enzyme is very high. As a result, speed of the reaction increases. So whenever you reduce the activation energy, the speed of the chemical reaction increases. So the enzymes activation energy is reduced whenever enzymes are present. Enzymes lower the activation energy. As a result, the speed of the reaction increases. Then we had also studied about the factors affecting enzyme activity, that is temperature and pH, concentration of the substrate, presence of inhibitor. We had discussed about these factors which are affecting the activity of enzyme. Okay, the enzyme activity is affected by temperature and pH as well as presence of concentration of the substrate, presence of inhibitor. So enzyme shows highest activity at optimum temperature and pH. So this is the optimum temperature and pH when the enzymes show highest activity. Activity declines below this optimum value and above the optimum value, the activity of the enzyme activity decreases. At lower temperature, enzyme activity becomes inactive. At higher temperature, enzymes are destroyed because proteins are denatured by heat. So at higher temperature, enzymes are destroyed or denatured, we call it as, because proteins are denatured by heat. So that is the factors of temperature and pH affecting the enzyme activity. So the enzyme shows highest activity at optimum temperature and pH. So either below or above this optimum value, the enzyme activity is affected. At very low temperature, the enzyme activity is temporarily inactive. At high temperature, the enzymes get destroyed or denatured because proteins are denatured by heat. So the temperature and pH will also continue with the pH part of it. So the inorganic catalysts work at high temperature and pressure, but enzymes get damaged at high temperatures of greater than 40 degrees centigrade. So catalysts, if they are inorganic, they work at high temperature and pressure, but enzymes get damaged at high temperature greater than 40 degrees centigrade. In thermophilic organisms like archaebacteria, they have enzymes which are stable at high temperature of up to 80 to 90 degrees centigrade. The enzymes are stable. So that you find in case of archaebacterians or thermophilic organisms. So thermophilic organisms have enzymes which are stable at high temperature up to 80 to 90 degree centigrade. So the other factor which affects enzyme activity is concentration of substrate. With the increase in substrate concentration, the velocity of the enzyme action rises initially and reaches a maximum velocity, Vmax we call it as. So with the increase in substrate concentration. So this Vmax, after reaching the Vmax, the enzyme reaction or action, enzyme activity is not exceeded by further rise in concentration after reaching Vmax because enzyme molecules are fewer than the substrate molecules. So the substrate, even though they are more, but enzyme molecules are fewer. So that is no free enzyme molecules for to bind with additional substrate molecules. So they reach a threshold point of Vmax, so the maximum velocity. So when the increase in substrate concentration, with the increase in substrate concentration, the velocity of the enzyme activity rises initially and reaches a maximum velocity, which we call it as Vmax. After reaching this Vmax, any further rise in substrate concentration, there is going to be no change in the enzyme action. So because enzyme molecules are fewer than the substrate molecules, that is, there are no enzyme molecules to bind with additional substrate. So this is the concentration of substrate. You can remember this graph. So the factors, another factor which affects the enzyme activity is presence of inhibitor. So inhibitor shuts off the enzyme activity. This is called as inhibition. The binding of specific chemicals, inhibitors, they shut off the enzyme activity. So we call it as inhibition. So the inhibition, so you can notice that closely similar to the substrate is called competitive inhibitor. See here the substrate is there and very similar to the substrate, closely similar to the substrate is the inhibitor is also structurally it is very similar to the substrate. So this we call it as competitive inhibitor. It competes with the substrate for binding site of the enzyme. As a result, the substrate cannot bind. Once this competitive inhibitor binds to the active site of the enzyme, the substrate cannot bind and the enzyme action declines. So this is competitive inhibition. The other one is non-competitive inhibition. Example for competitive inhibition is malonate is similar to the substrate succinate. So it inhibits succinic dehydrogenase in the following reaction. So malonate is the inhibitor which is similar to succinate in structure, the substrate succinate. So malonate inhibits succinic dehydrogenase in the following reaction. So this is an example for competitive inhibition. Competitive inhibitors are used to control bacterial pathogens. So if you are going to make the enzyme activity inactive, so the pathogens gets destroyed. So competitive inhibitors are used to control bacterial pathogens. Then I had discussed about the classification of nomenclature and enzymes. I asked you to remember it as 2-HIL, not to hell. It is 2-HIL. Transferases, O stands for oxidoreductases or dehydrogenases. HIL, hydrolases, lyases, isomerases. I stands for isomerases, lyases, and ligases. Then the classification and nomenclature of enzymes, I had discussed about it. The nomenclature of enzymes, the suffix, they have ASC. You should always remember about it. The cofactors are non-protein constituents which bind to the enzyme to make the enzyme catalytically active. So even the enzyme requires uh, catalytic activators. So they are the cofactors. So cofactors are non-protein constituents bound to the enzyme to make the enzyme catalytically active. So cofactors are enzymes for the enzyme. Enzyme ye enzyme. That is what cofactors are. So these are non-protein constituents which bound to the enzyme to make the enzyme catalytically active. Apoenzyme is the protein portion of the enzyme plus cofactor, they form this holoenzyme. Apoenzyme is inactive when they are having a cofactor, that is a non-protein constituent, which binds to this apoenzyme. They form this active holoenzyme. When the cofactor is removed from the enzyme, its catalytic activity is lost. So the types of cofactors are prosthetic group, coenzymes, and metal ions. So prosthetic groups, organic, they are tightly bound to apoenzyme. So example is heme peroxidase and catalase. So they are going to, heme is a cofactor or a prosthetic group in these enzyme peroxidase and catalase. They catalyze breakdown of H2O2 so to water and oxygen, hydrogen peroxide, H2O2. So they break down hydrogen peroxide to water and oxygen. This peroxidase and catalase, they have this heme as a cofactor or a prosthetic group. Organic, it is tightly bound to apoenzyme. So coenzymes, they are also organic, transient binding to apoenzyme. They are not tightly bound, they are transient binding to apoenzyme. Many coenzymes contain vitamins. Example, NAD and NADP coenzymes, they contain niacin. Okay, so which is nothing but nicotinic acid. Niacin is nicotinic acid. So metal ions, they form coordination bonds with side chains at active site and one or more coordination bond with the substrate. Example is zinc is a cofactor of carboxypeptidase. So this is what we had discussed in our topic of enzymes. Okay, so do you have any doubts or clarifications?